Camellia sat at the far end of the cramped dining table. The soft clinking of cutlery and murmur of conversation, welcome after nights camping out in the wilderness. She occasionally glanced at Michaela, who seemed to be avoiding eye contact. Camellia let out a sigh, instead turning to look at Tobias and Key, waving his hands about as he explained the past week. Tobias sat next to him, poking a lump of mashed potatoes with an unreadable expression. The journey here was pretty wondrous. I'd never seen Kalthos with strangers, so it was like I was re-experiencing it all with new eyes.
I see.
Plus, Michaela knows a lot about plants, and Camellia was super resourceful. Tobias gives him a small smile as he explained. And Lucian was so curious to know more about everything. I never met people so eager to—
Oh, that's splendid.
Lucian scooted closer upon hearing his name be mentioned. He gave a smile to Tobias, who inched away from him slightly.
It's so different from Roslyn here. I was astounded by the amount of old architecture.
Well, I should hope it's different. We are in a different location.
Lucian looked at him with surprise, then laughed nervously.
Good one!
Ha ha. Anyhow.
He turned to Michaela and Camellia, giving them a curious look.
Resourceful? How so?
Camellia put down her fork, exhaling softly. I can't really take credit for that. Key and Michaela were actually the ones getting us out of most of the well, situations we got into. Like getting lost.
Oh,
Gee. The wooden boy tugged at his cloak with a smile. Meanwhile, Michaela let out a soft laugh.
Don't be so bashful. You're the actual resourceful one here. Without that ability of yours, we would have taken weeks to get here.
Is that why my things have ended up missing?
Key looked away quickly, grimacing. Tobias smirked, picking up his mug of spiced tea and sipping it. The wooden boy glanced at him, letting out a quick laugh.
Oh, stop it!
Next to him, Lucian poked at his food, a small frown coming across his face. He then glanced over at Key, raising one eyebrow.
They all came from here?
Yes!
So it's really quite interesting how it works. I don't actually have the ability to do anything per se, but I can transport things like this.
Tobias sipped at the air as the mug he was holding disappears. The wooden boy then opens up his drawer, fishing out the mug again.
See? Presto!
Can we not do that at the dinner table? Please.
Oh, yes, of course.
He handed over the mug with a sheepish smile. Meanwhile, Lucian tilts his head with confusion.
Do you whittle things then? Practical things, but not much else. Huh, how did you know that?
Oh, I was just wondering if you made the model boat.
Model boat? What model boat?
Key suddenly went quiet, looking at the floor. His brother glanced over at him with wide eyes. His fork tapped against the plate as his brows arched.
What is he talking about? I never made any sort of model boat.
The dinner table hushed as everyone watched Tobias. His stormy eyes flickered over Key's guilty expression before he paled immediately. The man stammered, shrinking back a bit, before staggering up from his seat abruptly.
Excuse me.
He stumbled down the hall, yanking the door open to his room before slinking inside, the hinges creaking as he slams it shut. Key looks at his hands, messing with the knobs and knots on it.
Did I say something wrong?
No.
Then what happened?
It probably isn't our business to pry upon. Key let out a sharp breath, then glanced over at Michaela, who shrugged back with a grimace. Then the boy turned back towards Lucian, who was glancing around the group like a trapped hare.
I would be careful about anything with his magic. I've learned that he just doesn't enjoy talking about it. But I...
His ears drooped slightly as he began to frown.
I understand, I guess. I thought he would be more proud of being able to do such extraordinary things. I think any normal person would want what he has.
It doesn't seem like he wants it.
Lucian met eyes with Michaela, a brief expression of recognition passing over his face, before confusion quickly took its place. He shook his head.
Maybe he's just lonely. Maybe he just needs a friend, someone to tell him it's okay. Maybe.
Camellia observed the fray, brows raising with concern. She turned her gaze toward Tobias's room, watching the light of the candle fade from underneath the gap. The rest of the dinner faded into a gentle chatter, the world around her blurring into a soft watercolor smudge. Later that night, Camellia knelt on the floorboards of the rustic bedroom. The starlight hit her green hair, lighting the bits of coils and frizz in a silver hue. She muttered to herself, eyes shut tight. All the stars above, please, please listen to me. I know I don't ask for much, or pray very often, but please let my mother hold out just a bit longer. The knotted flooring was hard against her knees, the bits of unvarnished wood digging into her skin through her gown. Her eyes slowly opened to look through the paned window, the shivering night sky dazing her briefly. She pursed her lips tight. I know it's ridiculous to want to spend more time here, but I get the sense that we all have unfinished business. While I love my mother, I also have to take care of the family with me now. No, I want to take care of the family that's with me now. Please, forgive me for that. Camellia slowly got to her feet, letting out a grunt as she rubbed her knees. The room was small, but not quite claustrophobic. In fact, with the scarcity of furniture, it was almost comfortable. The moonlight danced across the room through the circular window, lighting the white sheets of the hay-stuffed bed nestled against the side wall. An end table stood at its side, the only thing it had upon it being a beeswax candle. The flame atop it flickered in the darkness, bits of wax falling down the side and pooling in the tin holder. She let out a soft sigh, bending down to put it out, but she paused. A hushed whisper came from outside her door. Slowly, she stood up, inching closer to the door and opening it just a crack. A faint light came from the kitchen, crawling into her room with a soft glow.
Apologize for leaving earlier.
I understand. We don't have to talk about it right now. But I just wanted to know. You seem different. Well, not different, but
What do you mean? I wasn't any different before than I am now.
I guess you're right. But still, you just don't seem...
Perhaps it's all the new people. Or maybe I'm just getting old.
Do you think you could end up being friends with him? A soft silence passed through the house. Camellia looked out, seeing shadows dance across the ground as Tobias's silhouette lifted itself to skirt across the room.
I don't know about that.
But you seem to be getting close to Camellia. Tobias let out a sardonic laugh, the sound of cups clinking making Camelia's ears twitch.
Yeah, well, close is certainly a word for it, I suppose.
She scowled into the darkness, rolling her eyes at the statement. More clinking resounded through the kitchen as the man grumbled.
Speaking of her, how did she make that thing?
What about Michaela? Or maybe Lucian?
Michaela seems to be more interested in fussing over you. And Lucian... It's not important. You can't just answer with that anytime someone asks you something personal. You know, you talk about how much I've changed, but I would say you've changed a lot more.
I'd say I've matured a little.
That's all. A chewed hum. I thought I did see more rings around your wrist.
Camellia winced at the joke, hearing Key grumble in annoyance and get up.
Wait, where are you? My room.
Have a good night.
Camellia inched back, watching as the wooden boy skulked to his room. Her eyes softened, heart clenching in her chest. The silence was so thick that she could hear the flames flicker behind her. Tobias's shadow lingered in the light before slowly hunching forward.
That was stupid. Why did I say that? Maybe she's right. I need to get better at those sorts of things.
The young woman stared at his silhouette, watching as he sighed and got up to go back to bed. She let out a small breath, closing the door and walking back to her bed, flopping down on the itchy covers. Of course, her family wasn't the only one with problems. Her eyelids grew heavier, falling slowly before she settled into sleep. For once, she found herself in a dreamless void. Her body felt weightless against the bed, as though she were floating on a cloud, until she suddenly hit the soft mulch of the ground. A light groan escaped her lips as the sensation of heaviness returned, anchoring her to the earth. She slowly stood up, blinking as she tried to clear the haze of confusion from her mind. Where was she? Mist enveloped her, vibrant and saccharine, its lavender purple hue shimmering with an enigmatic warmth that seemed to pulse gently around her. Camellia scratched her head, uncertain of what to do in such a peculiar place. Letting out a sigh, she began to walk forward, her lips pursed in a thin line of determination. Around her, stone epitaphs and tall obelisks, wrought with age and adorned with cracks and patches of moss, stood like silent stone sentinels in disorganized rows. They pointed upwards, towards a sky that wasn't quite a sky, but rather a vast void, deep and still, as though she had wandered into some kind of otherworldly sea cemetery. The atmosphere was thick with an uncanny stillness, the mist curling lazily around the bases of the stone markers as if to guide her forward. "Hello?" Her voice echoed into the depths, the sound carried away into the boundless void before being swallowed by it whole. It was like her words dissolved into the very fabric of nothingness, leaving no trace, only a deep quiet in their wake. "Hello? Is anyone there?" Camellia yelped as she tumbled forward, plunging into an open grave. A murky, saline substance engulfed her, cold and oppressive. She thrashed desperately, holding her breath as the viscous liquid pulled her further down into what felt like an endless void. But then, a warmth began to spread through her, soothing and unexpected, as if she were lying on a sunlit beach. The sensation gradually replaced the frigid cold, and she found herself slowly sitting up. She coughed instinctively, trying to expel the seawater from her lungs, but nothing came out, only her smooth, lukewarm breath. Her eyes shakingly opened, lashes fluttering for just a moment before recognition struck her like a wave. This was the beach of Rosalind. Its pristine yellow sand, dampened by the retreating seawater, glistened under the soft light of morning. The air was imbued with a delicate perfume of salt, mingling with the earthy scent of wild rosemary and the crisp tang of pine citrus, wafting down from the cliffs above. In front of her, the clear azure sea stretched endlessly, with swirls of green and navy dispersed through it like paint on a seafoam canvas. Within the watery expanse, rocky crags jutted out, Their surface is kissed by the ocean's bubbly waves. Atop their peaks, gulls perched, preening their feathers as they waited patiently for the tide to deliver their next meal. Her brows knit together. How had she gotten here? The sound of crunching sand snapped her out of her confusion.
I thought I saw something odd here earlier.
Camelia's head snapped to the side to see a younger Lucian walking on the beach. He looked to be about 19, with his usually tousled hair pulled back into a tight ponytail that was in the process of growing out. He was looking around the beach, eyes scanning with clear excitement. At first, she felt her heart fill with warmth at seeing him so happy. Then, she saw who was next to him. Their father. Camelia's fist clenched to her side, immediately getting up to follow the two memories down the beach. Lucian turned back to Mephisto, who looked unamused at this excursion, yawning slightly.
You know, I take time out of my very busy day to take you here. You are lucky that your studies have been going so well. Now, what exactly is this thing you wish to show me? It almost looked like a wooden statue. Oh, one of your little piddly sea drift trinkets. Wonderful. It didn't seem like just any old statue, though.
Camelia followed behind them like a ghost, looking around curiously. The lavender mist coiled at her feet like a stray dog following a passerby, its lukewarm sensation oddly comforting in the midst of the scene. Their father let out an unamused snort, and she tightened her fists, gritting her teeth. I know I tend to just get pointless things. I'm trying to work on it. Oh, no, son. Don't worry. I don't mind that you have such peculiar interests. As they say, one man's trash is another man's. The deity trailed off, staring into the sea bream. For a moment, it was silent save for the cries of the gulls snapping at fish, the smooth hiss of the sea against sand. Amelia looked around his back, eyes widening slightly as she saw what he was so transfixed by. The sun-dried body of Key lay upon the sand, eyes lifeless and distant as the now inanimate mannequin stared into the morning sky. Camelia glanced up at Mephisto, trying to read his expression, but before she could, Lucian launched forward with a look of awe, pointing at the wooden boy in the sand.
Father, look! I told you I wasn't making it up. No, I suppose you won't. Let's take a closer look, shall we?
They traveled further down the beach, the specter of Camelia following close behind with confusion. When they reached the inanimate mannequin that would soon be Key, Mephisto let out a thoughtful bending over it and inspecting closer. He picked at the sea-rotted linen of Key's cloak, then paused, lifting the obsidian necklace.
Very interesting. Very, very interesting. What is it? Is there something wrong? Well, no, that's simply preposterous. That could never be. Please just tell me. Is it something rare? Rare would be an understatement, my boy. This necklace. Yes, I do believe it's Carthosian make. You're certain? Bup. Don't get too excited yet, boy. I said I believed it to be Carthosian make. But, if my hunch is correct, yes.
Lucian staggered back slightly with wide eyes. He then quickly hopped forward, picking up Key's inanimate vessel eagerly.
We need to take him home right away!
Mephisto stood up, giving his son a smug look. He shook his head, adjusting his hat slightly.
I don't understand why you would want to keep something, well, so worthless. No one would believe you that this doll is from Kalphos. Not to mention the workmanship. Are you quite sure you want to take it home? Yes, I'm sure. I suppose it can't be helped then. We should give him a name, An old Calvasian name, perhaps? How about Cologne? I do believe it suits him quite well. Cologne. That's perfect!
Camelia's eyebrows raised. Kalan. The name Lucian had originally called Key before they discovered his actual name. But the mist further coiled around her ankles, the lukewarm sensation growing cooler as Mephisto looked at his son with an arched brow, stroking his chin with thought. The sound of the waves devolved into a hiss as the scenery began to shift, mesh, and mingle around her. The cerulean blue of the ocean turned into a grainy purple, while the mist seemed to seep into the sand.
You don't plan on showing him to your sister, do you?
Of course! She would find him. Wait. Why?
Camellia may not understand. Come to think of it, hasn't she been quite caught up in her studies as of late?
Yeah. I suppose. I mean, I did mention that a bit back.
And you looked absolutely downtrodden mentioning it.
Because I guess I feel bad. I'm not being that useful.
Oh, don't worry your little head about that. She doesn't need you. Certainly not right now.
I would just get in the way, wouldn't I?
Oh, I didn't say that.
Camellia growled, stomping forward towards the figments of the memory, pointing at her father with rage. How fucking dare you! You calculating, conniving charlatan of a... Her words cut off as she felt a sickening sensation. She lurched forward, coughing into the lavender-soaked sand. Her fingers clutched at nothing, the world around her dissolving into mist and rot. Camelia's vision was growing blurry. She could hardly see. This was like dying a death that was unending. Then suddenly a hand clutched at her ankle, yanking her down into the sand. Startled, she tried to claw at the non-existent earth, only to be pulled through. When Camellia came to, she was struggling with her breath, a sharp, buzzing sensation in the back of her head. She slowly looked up to see the shadow in her dreams. Camellia struggled to talk, chest heaving with effort. She rolled onto her back, the mulch staining her nightgown dark gray. She slowly brought her gaze up to the specter, who looked her over with a tilted head, their pure ruby eyes creasing with what seemed to be confusion.
Why are you here?
Before she could respond, they snapped their fingers, and she woke up in bed. The sheets were tangled around her like snakes. She let out a soft breath of relief, rubbing the bridge of her nose. If she could have just one day where nothing happens at all, that would be splendid. Her gaze softened despite the exhaustion that racked her body. Looking up at the ceiling, was that just a dream? Something told her no. The appearance of the specter, the accuracies. It felt like she had been peering back in time. Her gaze flickered over to the door, finding it slightly ajar. Camellia furrowed her brows, slowly getting out of bed. On the side of the door was a small note with messy handwriting.
Sorry you had to see that last night. I could tell you were watching. I tried making you coffee. It's bad. From Tobias.
Right behind the door was a lukewarm mug of coffee, pushed to the side so it wouldn't be knocked over. She let out a soft laugh, taking it gingerly between her hands. At least some good things were on the horizon.